Welcome to Complete QB Live. Tonight's special guest is Maasai Maynor of Navy football. Tonight's special guest is Eric DeGotti. Here are your hosts, Chris Johnston and Ryan O'Flaherty.
Guys, welcome back to Complete QB Live. Today is June 17th. This is episode 8 in 2020. Joined now by co-host and co-director Ryan O'Flaherty. Coach O'Flaherty, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing well, Coach. How are you?
I'm doing all right, man. Excited for tonight because we got a good mix. We've got a current college football player as well as a guy who's really an industry leader across a couple sports, but specifically football, as we talk about some of the physical things that we got going on. And you can see that I'm talking about Maasai Maynor, quarterback at U.S. Naval Academy, who you're well familiar with. Played his high school ball under your tutelage, Coach, and really a pretty special athlete with a unique story because he's undergone some changes just in terms of style of offense as he's moved from the high school game to the collegiate game. So we're excited to talk to him. And now we also have Coach DeGotti, who's going to bring a wealth of knowledge along just kind of that human movement and performance world, and then tie it specifically into quarterback, which is arguably the most complex position in any sport that we can coach. So we're excited to have Eric on as well. We're going to talk a mix. Normally we talk some NFL or some NCAA football. We got a mix going tonight, Coach. We're going to talk some about defensive coaches that have a pretty how can I say it? So it's a different tack than we're usually taking because we talk to offensive coaches all the time. Now I know that we had Vince Reynolds from Syracuse University last week, and a lot of fun to get a defensive perspective, especially a D-line perspective, as well as what he brought when it came to recruiting. But we're also going to talk a little bit about just defensive situations or coaches that we've got our eye on in 2020, and I think that'll be fun to kick around a little bit. We'll obviously do that just before we get to our first guest, and our first guest will be Maasai Maynor from the Naval Academy. We're going to talk. We're not going to do drill of the week this week, only because we're going to be talking so much specificity. There's an SAT word for you, Coach. We're going to be talking a lot of specific things about.
I'm keeping a list of them, Coach.
Yeah, man. I think you should retake it, Coach. I'd be willing to enter a little contest. Maybe we can get it going for charity. That I take the SAT and you take the SAT. Let's see who scores high. My money's on you.
No way. I'm done. I'm done with school.
All right.
I completed my master's. I'm done. Not taking any more tests.
You know what? You're a man of letters, Coach, and I'm proud of you for that. I do remember that I jumped an astonishing 10 points from the first time I took the SAT to the second. And after I was like, I'm all done with this bad boy. So I got into the school I wanted to go to. But after that, after we go through both of our interviews, we'll jump into complete QB trivia, and it's a Navy theme this week. So it's going to be some pretty exciting stuff, all right? So, all right, let's get into our first deal. And, Coach, I know that we're going to talk intriguing defensive coach situations, right? And you're going to give us your perspective on what you think, or two guys that you think. You're going to give two. I'm going to give one. Guys that you think are pretty interesting stories. Why don't you start with your guy that you have in the Big Ten, Coach? All right, let's see what and see what your thoughts are there, and I'll give you some response on it.
Yeah. So the defense coordinator from the Big Ten that I'm going to go with is Jim Leonard from Wisconsin. I'm a miserable Jets fan, and he had a stint with the Jets there. So naturally, I'm a fan of his. When you look at Wisconsin, you think of them as power run type of offense, and that's what they're known for. A couple of years ago with Dave Aranda, and then they transitioned to Jim Leonard. The biggest thing for me when I was looking at defensive coordinators that maybe you don't want to see down the road, or guys that might have a little bit more of a bounce back year, I think Wisconsin is one of those defenses. Very uncharacteristic. Gave up 22.6 points a game, points per game last year. In 2018. And then last year they went down to 16.9. They had a really their split home and away was pretty drastic. They were awesome at home on defense. But Coach Leonard's got them up to number 4 total defense in the country. And when you look from the offensive perspective, like we normally do, we're looking at third down defense, scoring defense, and then red zone defense. Right. So they were number 1 in the country on third down, so getting the offense off. They were tied for 6th in scoring on the defensive side, and then they rounded out to 11th overall in the red zone. So just looking at that and kind of seeing where they are in the Big Ten, and obviously they're always in the mix. But I really want to see what they bring out next year. They're very multiple defense, as many are at the college level. So it's going to be really exciting. And like I said, Coach Leonard is a former Jet, so I'm a fan.
So there's 2 things I like about you selecting Jim Leonard as a guy you thought was intriguing, borderline SAT word. They're intriguing. I think two points that come to mind. Number one, I like his makeup as a coach because he was always a guy who was undercounted, undervalued, and then over-delivered as a player. He was just like a dude. I think he's probably his combine measurement, I bet, or his pro day measurement was probably only around 5'8". And he was just a dude who always overachieved. And I like that, especially for guys that run defenses. Those guys are fiery, and those guys usually get after it because they want their voice to be heard. They're smaller guys, and I think emotionally what that does for a team is a great thing. The other thing is I think the defense at a place like Wisconsin, whereas you mentioned traditionally they run the ball a lot, they're kind of very much a play action. There's a prototype. When you think of a Wisconsin team and a football player and their ethos, their identity, it's like they're going to run the ball over your face, and then they're going to pass the ball in an opportune way, making sure that they're doing they're picking their spots and getting big plays in the pass game. Not because they want to come out and throw the ball 38, 42 times a game. It's not unusual to see a Wisconsin quarterback turn in a 21 for 29 day, but be real productive in doing that. You know what I mean? So, and that's always complimentary football. If you have a good defense, you can play like that. If you don't, it's very difficult to play like that. It's not fun falling behind when you're in that situation. So that's why I think I agree with you on that, and I think it'll be some fun to watch how that situation goes. Now, the first guy that I brought up, which is kind of might throw you off a little bit, Coach. We jump to the NFL and we talk about Matt Patricia from a defensive perspective, and obviously I'm aware that he is a defensive coordinator. But I think everybody, even if you're not in the know with the Detroit Lions, you understand that Matt Patricia has a big hand in what goes on there defensively. It's what he's comfortable with and what comes natural to him. The interesting part will be when you get what is hopefully a healthy Matthew Stafford for the 2020 season, and them having an opportunity in a division that's improved surprisingly a little bit. I think the Vikings were probably better than people expected them to be last year. I think you may see a rejuvenated Aaron Rodgers this year because his ego has been dinged up a little bit with the selection of Jordan Love in the NFL draft. So I think it's a very competitive division, and I think there was a really good chance that Matt Patricia might have been out of work last December, and it didn't work out that way. So, guys, as we do this, please let us know. Go ahead and answer in the chat if any of these coaching situations are on your mind. You think there's some interest there, or if there's any other coaching situations throughout the NFL or NCAA football that you find interesting. But I think Matt Patricia and how much he'll progress in his coach. This is year 3. I had it in my notes, and I put that as year 3 as an NFL head coach, and it'll be interesting to see where Matt Patricia, in terms of his progress, and I guess we all evaluate ourselves in our maturation as football coaches. Where will he be, and how comfortable will he be in helping the offense evolve, in addition to improving his defensive unit? So, interesting one there for me. Any 2 cents to chip in with on Matt Patricia, Coach?
Just with Coach Patricia, it's the Belichick, the Belichick factor, and you see a lot of guys go from Belichick's staff go on to have success, but it's always, is it still Bill Belichick? You know what I mean? So it's a tough shadow to escape from. But year 3, we'll see how he progress. And obviously, it's much different being a head coach than just running one side of the ball.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if, and Coach, I know that both you and I, we know a good number of guys that coach in the NFL. So there's times where you hear stuff just about like what the vibe is in the NFL, or it's like any other profession. Guys say, hey, this guy's good to work for. That guy likes to do this or likes to do that. The impression that, and this is no inside information because I think this was pretty publicly available, that Matt Patricia, when he came in the door, was really rigid. Like he came in really hard. Like this is how we're going to do it. Not to say it was the Patriot way, but I do think you can kind of divide up the guys that have coached with Bill Belichick and then have tried to kind of bottle up that formula and go other places. At least early on, Matt Patricia hasn't had a ton of success. Josh McDaniels, not really when he was out in Denver. But Eric Mangini certainly in 2 stops. Not a lot of success. And I'd taken a step back and thinking about what guys tried to kind of emulate the Belichick model and what guys kind of tried to be themselves. Romeo Crennel, by the time he got a job with the Browns, he had a 10-6 season. Think about that. He had a 10-6 season with the Browns. They should be getting the bust ready in Canton. There should be a guy finishing chiseling the statue for him because as recent history has shown, that ain't easy. Going 10-6 in Cleveland. And by that time in his life and just his evolution as a coach, he wasn't trying to imitate Bill Belichick wherever he went. The other guy that sticks out in my mind is Bill O'Brien. Now, he's been positively crucified this year, some of it very deservingly, with some of the roster moves and just the organization in general, some of the stuff they've done. But I do think he's done a really good job of just being his own guy and not trying to be necessarily, let's say, a Belichick disciple. So I think it's interesting to see how Matt Patricia will do here in his in this year, which is probably a make or break year in a lot of ways for that franchise who got rid of. Hate to be the guy, but I gotta say, once upon a time, not too long ago, they got rid of Jim Caldwell, who's probably one of the most underrated NFL coaches. He was playing with a dead, and I mean dead roster compared to some of his divisional and NFC rivals. And I thought he got a lot of production out of that team, and I'd be happy to take up that debate with anybody. Go ahead and DM us if you want to talk about that one-on-one. I'll talk to you about Caldwell and what I think he did. And also the theme of Complete QB Live, an excellent NFL quarterback coach as well. So, Coach, your final guy here in this segment tonight. Who else you've got an eye on for a coaching situation? Back to the college
so this was when we decided we were going to do this segment about defensive coordinators. I already had this one picked before the big news broke today with Taj Bullock committing to Virginia Tech. But I'm going to go with Justin Hamilton, who has not called a single play or defensive play at Virginia Tech yet. Was just recently promoted after legendary Bud Foster decided to retire after this year. And again, when you look at what Bud Foster's done over his career at Virginia Tech, it is extremely impressive. When you look at the whole body of work,
Sure.
There's no doubt that they've slipped over the last couple of years, defensively, statistically speaking. And the biggest thing for me is that Justin Hamilton is a former director of player personnel, and that's really, really important. When you can promote from within and the guy understands the players inside and out.
Sure.
I think that is a huge, huge piece to the puzzle here.
Sure.
He does have experience. He was at UVA Wise. He called the defense there.
Yep.
Spent some time at VMI and then Virginia Tech for the last couple of years.
Sure.
I think from a staff perspective, I think there's going to be some longevity there. I'm sure, in a couple of years, Justin Hamilton will, be up for a lot of different jobs around the country. But at least for the time being, I think they're, it's an electric place to play in. And I think just younger guy that really understands his players from being in that previous role, director of player personnel.
Sure.
I'm really, really interested. And I hope they win. I hope they win a couple national championships over the next couple of years.
Yeah. So, Coach, I'm here to confirm you weren't pandering to the Hokies when this was selected. I think our initial pre-production meeting on Sunday, you said you were going to go with Justin Hamilton, and
Hmm.
I'm going to jump in and just tell you that I think that we have a what I like about him, and this is a theme we've come back to a lot. I think they've got a guy on their hands because this was a quick rise, Coach. If I remember correctly, this was just 2019 was his first season at VTech as working in the secondary, correct? And then
Yes.
you got the bio up. So I mean, that was just one season, and 4 months later, he's the defensive coordinator, taking over for a guy who really has been the architect of what their identity, along with special teams, has been for the last 32 years, somewhere in that window, where they really picked up under Frank Beamer. They picked up Virginia Tech football and turned it into really a national power. But what stands out with Coach Hamilton for me is the way that the guy is able to command the room as a recruiter, which we know is crucial. Coach, as you know, he recruits North Jersey, so we're both familiar with him.
Yeah.
And we've both had players offered by him. You had, obviously, a guy who's also, obviously, with you at St. Peter's, but also a member of the Complete QB family, and Taj Bullock. Congrats to Taj. Good job today, man, nailing that down. We'll probably talk at some point about that, but excellent job there with selecting the Hokies. But I think just in terms of what he brings as a recruiter is just it's worth its weight in gold, as you know. And I hate to say it, but it's not that guys don't have. It's not that people are not valued as coaches in college football for their ability to coach, but recruiting is at least as important in the college game. And if you're not able to, like I said, if you're not able to command a room, it's not it ain't working. It's just not happening for you. You know what I mean? So it's really an important thing. So I think that's a good take. Those three situations as we see what's going on with them as the 2020 season unfolds, Coach. So, Coach, I think we're just about ready for guest time, right?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so I want to intro this guest before we bring him on, but I want to talk a little bit about what this guy has been in terms of, I guess his evolution over time as a quarterback. Coach, he played for you guys at St. Peter's Prep and was a really dynamic player. He was an all-state performer. You guys obviously continued with the long string of success you had when Mosiah was at the trigger. But then as it came time for college selection process, kind of a choice that surprised some people because he went from being in a spread, wide open, throw the ball around, have some fun, to an option offense. And we'll obviously talk to Mosiah about that during this interview. But now he's at one of the programs that is, and I think this is a reflection of the type of kid that he is and competitor that he is, that he wanted to be in a program that was consistently great. And there's not many programs. I think they're probably in 2 or 3 programs that have been ranked the most in the top 25 over the last quarter century, which is pretty amazing when you take a step back and think about it, that they've been consistently ranked in the top 20 or 25 teams in the country for that long of a run. And I think it's the way they run their program. I think it's the uniqueness of their offense. I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. So we're pretty excited to talk to this guy. So we are going to welcome in here now. We're going to say hello from the U.S. Naval Academy. We're going to welcome Mosiah Maynor, quarterback at Navy. So welcome, Mosiah. How you doing? You got us okay on the audio link?
Yeah, I can hear you. How you doing?
All right, great, man. So welcome to the show tonight. I think you must be thinking this is a media appearance, man. I'm sick of these guys. I played for one in high school, and one of them has been working with me for
No, you're good.
done 5 years on individual training. So you've got you got some familiar faces here for sure, man. And I just we want to thank you for being here. First of all, this has to be a crazy time for you guys. I know that you recently got kind of your marching orders, literally, because you're in the Navy. But you've got some instructions about probably when you, and I don't know if that's stuff that you can make public or not, but you guys are just now getting an idea of when you're able to go back and get back to training and all that. What's this period right now been like? Just being that you obviously at a place like Navy, you're getting your feet wet for your first year, and now boom, looking forward to your very first college spring ball, and then oh by the way, there's not going to be spring ball, right? So what's the springtime on into the early summer? What's that been like for you as a second year quarterback?
Yeah, so I was definitely hyped for spring ball coming up, and when it got canceled and we had to stay home, it was a bummer. But it's basically just been finishing off school, working out with a couple kids I went to prep with who live close to me, And
Sure.
yeah, basically school and working out and enjoying time with family that I usually don't get.
Yeah, I bet that's pretty unique. So being at the Naval Academy, Mosiah, what's I mean, this we could probably do a whole hour on this, just what it's like adjusting to a place like that. Football, I should have asked you in pre-production. We probably should have said, "Hey, what was the rank? Where does football fall in terms of difficulty?" I know it's great football, but shoot, you got some other stuff that you got to worry about at Navy too. What's that been like in terms of just life and the discipline it requires, and then also the academic piece? Because I've heard Navy is no joke academically. What's that been like?
So first, it's definitely it's a different lifestyle coming in as like a civilian and not knowing how things go, and then they train you into that. So that's definitely the big thing new. And then academically, it's a very rigorous school. But one thing I do really like about the academic system is they have a big support system. Students, they try to help you. They reach out and help you as much as possible, and also teachers, they stay until like 9:30, 10, willing to help and give extra help to anybody. So
Okay.
that's one of the reasons I kind of went, because I knew it was kind of a hands-on program. We have an 8-to-1 ratio when it comes to students to teachers. So
Wow. Did you?
I mean,
Is it true? Is it true that you started? Is it true that you started crying when they shaved all your hair off? Is that true? Did that happen?
no, that is not true. I actually shaved my hair off before I got there, just so I could get used
All
to
right.
it.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Coach O'Flaherty, what was it like for you? Just, I mean, I know transition let you get a little bit of time questioning Maasai here, but obviously it had to be something for you just to see a guy go from being a spread quarterback for you to having to get under center for probably Pee Wee football, because I even know when you came from Brick City that you were probably in the gun a good bit, Maasai. So it had been a long time, right? so Coach O'Flaherty, thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Masai, first of all, good to see you. I haven't talked to you in a while. I guess you lost my number, but that's okay. Um, uh, so when we talk, obviously you threw the ball quite a bit in your high school career. Being a varsity quarterback for 4 years, you hold a lot of our records, passing records at St. Peter's. So when you went through the recruiting process, and I know, not just Navy, West Point was constantly in Chad Wilt was, I thought, one of the better recruiters in the nation. But what were the factors? And you alluded to this just seconds ago. What were some of the factors that when you compiled all the information from the schools that you were looking at, what set Navy above everybody else?
Well, the first thing I definitely would say was the coaching staff. They were very genuine and showed me a lot of love, and that carried throughout. And I can still see that today. That was probably the biggest thing, because talking to other college football players, they say basically the coaching staff is like the people you're going to be around the most. So that was the biggest thing. Then it was like what school I like for actually the school if football were to end at some point, and like what school could set up my future. And I knew Navy, like they can set your future up well. So I definitely, those are my biggest things. Just the coaching staff. What can I get after school? And also the like I said, the teacher to student ratio, because I knew I'm a kid who kind of needs to be one-on-one with the teacher. They say I need to. All right, can you go over this please again? And those are one of the schools where they'll do that and they have no problem with it. So yeah, it was just like how I kind of meshed well, putting football aside, and like what school I actually like for the school.
Good stuff. Now, we talked, I guess 2 weeks ago, we had Jordan McAfee on, who started his career at UConn and now is at Assumption. And I asked him the same question, and it might be a little bit different that obviously you're in a service academy. Take us into a game week. What's your week like?
Game week, a lot of preparation coming into the week. Basically just prepping for their defense. Looking at their tendencies, look at what they do.
What's Mosiah? One thing that interests me as I listen to Coach O'Flaherty ask the question, day by day as the week unfolds. Like I'd be just interested to know, like, how's it? How's your take us from the end of the last game going forward? Like how the week kind of breaks down for you, because there's got to be some limitations being in an academy environment, right?
Mm-hmm. say we have a game on Saturday, Sunday we have off, Monday we start practice back up. Practices after school. We'll have meetings during lunch period. Then we'll have practice. After practice, we'll have lift, and then we usually just repeat.
Yeah.
But in the meetings, that's when we really get to like really understand like the tendencies and stuff the defense does that we're going up against, and that's when we set our game plans.
No doubt. Now, you were obviously, you probably felt a little bit at home because you did a lot of scout team quarterback at Navy this year, right? And you look around your league, you've got like SMU, you've got these teams that are throwing a rock and having some fun. You must have been like, all right, this is my comfort level right here, right? What was that like?
Most definitely is.
Did you feel like you performed well as a true freshman in that environment on the scout side of things?
Yes, I definitely do feel like I did. And while I was giving the defense work with other offenses, that I was also still trying to learn the new offense that I'm not used to, like the option offense. You know what I mean? I would try to like stay after and get a couple under center work because I was not really good with that coming in. The under center thing was not me because I have not been under center. I literally have never been under center before Navy. So that was a wide awake. And I remember we would work out with the under center, but getting it from the hand and actually being under center is something different.
No doubt. Absolutely. It's gotta be something that's crazy. Coach, I know I jumped in there. Did I get you midstream on Mosiah?
No, we're good if you want to jump back over and then I'll wrap up.
So what's your what would you say going into things at Navy? What do you think technically? I know you've talked about being under center. What's the thing that if there's one thing that Maasai Maynor could fix going into having a year under your belt, what is it technically about being an option quarterback that you think that you'd seek to fix, you'd hope to fix?
First, like it was definitely a different lens on how they look at defenses because first they look at defenses kind of like techniques, backers, stunts, like how people are placed. That was a big thing because like usually like how I learned defenses, it was kind of the safeties, corners. You kind of just look at them, whereas they key on to the reads basically, and those are usually on the line, so the techniques. And another thing I would say is footwork, because if you have good footwork, you can crawl off the mesh. You can really make it hard for the people that you're reading and you're pitching off of. So I would say footwork is another technical thing that I really had to work on.
Absolutely. And I think a lesson for quarterbacks too. You could be in the wishbone, you could be in the option, you could be in the spread. Coach, hopefully one of our good friends, BCAP, listening tonight, you could be in the air raid, right, Coach? And the footwork's really important. You gotta be really good with it. You know what I mean? Mosiah, let me ask, just speaking purely as a passer, what do you think you do well? And as a passer, what do you need to get better at?
I think as a passer, one thing I do well is accuracy in the pocket. But one thing I feel like I definitely need to work on is like my timing, like being able to time with my footwork and like the wide receiver's routes, like timing that up, not waiting or not hitching too much, just kind of it being smooth.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's something certainly that quarterbacks across different ranges of offense, that's something that's really important for them, obviously, to be able to do that. Now, we know that it's got to be a unique thing for you in terms of just in this day and age where we're at and what's been going on the last few weeks in particular. Like that's really come into like sharp focus about just like social injustice and things that are happening where we're finding a lot of young people, college athletes especially. I mean, if you jump on ESPN.com on any day and there's going to be another college football player or group that's just taking exception to, just kind of the same old same with the way that Black people are regarded and treated and represented, really. It's got to be a unique thing to be obviously a kid with some consciousness and some sharp mental faculties to be able to see things in the world that are not right and want to speak out, but also being part of, essentially you're part of the military, you're part of the United States Naval Academy. What's that been like for you, and what's it been like as all this is going on, obviously in quarantine back home? What's kind of asking an open-ended question, but what's it been like for you, and what's been on your mind here these last few weeks?
How I feel about the whole thing that's going on today, I feel like the biggest problem is systemic racism, and I feel like basically all this happens through ignorance. Basically, I feel like people are acting a certain way because they don't know who people are. And I feel like the only way we can really understand who we are as a people and is through experiencing each other and actually branching out and like actually trying to figure out who somebody is without just going to the stereotypes of how somebody thinks they are. So I feel like in order for us to change, it's gonna have to come with some discomfort, because you can't really change if you're comfortable. You know what I mean? You have to put yourself in a discomfortable position in order to change. So I feel like the biggest thing is branching out and trying to learn other people and who they are.
I think it's a really fair point. I think there was a couple of college football coaches that really got some backlash when they first were presented with this. You know, you talked about that absence of comfort, and just like, a couple of guys said, hey, we're going to pray on it, and there's got to be a lot of forgiveness. And I think the initial reaction, at least that I heard, and Coach O'Flaherty and I talked about this, we heard from a lot of players and coaches that said, well, wait a minute, this isn't really about, it's certainly in terms of like what went on in Minneapolis a few weeks ago, and unfortunately what has continued to go on in some spots. It wasn't really about forgiveness or prayer or anything like that. Although those things are great, and those things definitely have their role. It was more about, as you said, identifying some of the systemic stuff and attacking it and putting people in a spot where they may not be as comfortable as they would be. Because, Coach O'Flaherty knows I'll get on my soapbox. At no point in history have we seen great change when we were just like, you know what, let's just be forgiving and let's move on. It doesn't work that way. So I think that's a really good point, Mosiah, and I appreciate you bringing that up, man. So we're obviously really excited that you were able to join us here tonight, and I want you to promise that you're going to come back once we get there. We're pulling for you. We didn't even really talk about it, but you feel like you're in the mix this year to potentially be the quarterback at the Naval Academy. Can I put you on the spot and say that right there?
Yes, sir.
That's the goal. That's the mentality, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, good, man. Well, listen, I know everybody, certainly from the Complete QB family, we certainly wish you the best. And so we're really going to look forward to the time when we, as I said, are able to catch back up with you and figure out what it is that, what your role is going to be in 2020. And so really excited for it, bud, okay?
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to be with us, man.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Mosiah.
All right.
All right, so Coach, so that's obviously a fun little interview to be able to do with Maasai. One of the things that stood out for me, Coach, is that I can't really imagine what it would be like to go into that type of environment and be the guy who's came from just being in a spread offense like that, and now have the opportunity to go forget about the football for a second. Like, that was no joke. Mosiah was giving us kind of the edited version of like how crazy it gets, but this is a guy going into an entirely, like, talking about getting thrown into a new way of life, Forget it. We're not even talking the SEALs or anything else. Just saying regular Naval Academy life it's serious business, Coach, you got a characteristic of Mosiah before we move on to the next segment. Something about you that stands out. Something about him that stands out in your mind from your time with him as a high school quarterback.
Yeah, Maasai is just tremendously competitive. He competes in everything he does, from PE class to summer workouts to 7-on-7s to obviously games and practice and all that. He's a tremendous competitor, and there's I'm not surprised that he's going to be in the mix to get on the field this year, just because of that competitiveness. And he's had that for the minute he stepped on campus at St. Peter's. He came in and I can remember him as a freshman. Throwing the ball on the varsity level, and he competed. As if he was an upperclassman. So,
no doubt.
I think that's going to take him a long way, not just in football, but also in life.
No doubt. I agree. And I think grittiness is way up there on the list of characteristics you need to have if you're going to play at one of the service academies for sure. So thanks to Mosiah and good luck to him. Coach, we get to jump on to our next segment and our next guest here. Quick intro for Coach Degatti. Eric Degatti is the founder of One Human Performance. He goes by he's got a lot of titles that are popularly known, but the one that sticks in my mind is the performance coach. And I think that's a really good way to put it. And we're going to talk about some of the terms that get thrown around in like the whole human movement industry, I guess. And Coach will have some interesting perspective on that. Coach has trained the medical staffs for, I lost count, 3 or 4 NFL teams. He's a leader in the FMS, the functional movement screen industry or phenomenon. It's not hard to find Eric Degatti content on the web. You do a quick search on across platforms, and you'll find there's always someone who's grabbing him for a clinic or a seminar. I know he's an instructor and really does a lot of things across a lot of organizations and sports. He's got an extensive baseball background. We're obviously going to concentrate on the football piece tonight because he's so heavily involved with that. But what I think applies to quarterbacks, and the reason we asked Eric to come on was because quarterback may well be, and I'll make the argument that it is, the most complex series of movements, aside from maybe a baseball batter, at least in my mind, to coach. And so I think we need to have an intelligent approach to it and not approach it from a position of one size fits all. So we'll talk with Coach Degatti about that as he joins us. So without further ado, I want to welcome to the call and welcome to the show as our super producer Renee brings him up on the screen. We're going to get Eric Degatti with us. Coach Degatti, want to welcome you and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Coach.
Coach, you
Thanks
got
for having me.
No problem. Coach, studio audience is going crazy. That's probably the loudest they've been for anybody. You know what I mean? So really happy to have you. Again, they won't stop. Coach. So we obviously want to thank you for being here, Eric. What's it been like? How sick are you of Zoom right now, Coach? Aside from being sick of me, because you got to deal with me all the time. How sick are you of Zoom meetings, and what's that been like? Keeping your athletes bought in for the different programs and individuals that you deal with in particularly in the football world. What's that been like?
I'll tell you what, in 20 years of training people, this last 3-4 month stretch has really challenged me in terms of being creative on the technical side, and then on the tactical side in terms of coaching and being able to get kids to buy in. It is hard to get a group of high school kids to buy in, to show up 2, 3, 4 times a week at middle of the afternoon when it's 60 degrees and sunny outside to sit in a dark room and follow a workout. But at the same time, like we said to a bunch of the teams that I work with, this is the great equalizer, right? What a lot of coaches did in the beginning of this was just say, I'm going to throw together the workout we normally do, send it out to everybody, and I'm going to hope for the best that these kids are going to do it. And I can guarantee you that's not happening. If they're doing it, they're not doing it right. That's if they're doing it at all. And that's under the assumption that, you're dealing with kids that have a weight room or some type of facility they have access to, because that's the other thing. No gym's open. So unless a kid has, the equipment in their house, which is if they do, it's going to be in a yard sale in about 3 months. And so their ability to execute that. And most of the teams that I work with, they don't have the, if you have a kid that's living, in a family of 6 in a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment, there's no room to set up a weight room, right? There is no extra space. So you have to be creative. And how can I get a kid with body weight, with his couch and a couple square feet of space, and get them to be as athletic as possible? So when we get the green light to go on, in our case in New Jersey, July 13th, that we can hit the field and be ready to go.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the things that I guess kind of transitions into you've got a history. You were involved with NFL teams around the time of the last NFL lockout. If I remember correctly. And I remember having this conversation with you previously, just discussing what was the impact coming out of that history, I guess 9 years ago in the NFL, when players didn't have access to facilities for an extended period, multiple months. I think it might have been as long as like 5 or 6 months, if I remember it correctly. What was the impact on, and those are pro athletes, what was the impact in terms of injury, preparation, preparedness, all that? What was the impact?
Eric Cressy just did a great piece on this and brought up some research, and I remember it happening real time, because at the time I was still working with the Giants, and that we had more Achilles injuries in the NFL in the first 3 weeks than you generally have over the course of an entire season. And that's just one injuries. That's just one pathology. So the injury rate when sports start back up, because I have pro athletes around the country, and they're in the same boat. Not every one of them has that Tom Brady souped up gym in their house. So lot for every one of those, there's 100 guys who are struggling to make it. And those guys don't have access to that stuff. So you're going to see a unreal amount of injuries when we start back up.
Well, that's scary. I hope the people that have been listening to the wisdom of guys like you, at least, can kind of stave that off. And I know from having just an up close and personal look at the way that you approach things, there's been a major emphasis on, obviously, if we're home now, what's the most basic thing that I know a high school coach for sure is going to say, well, at least do some push-ups and sit-ups. You know what I mean? When you think push-ups and you think those type of things, there are all these like pushing or pressing movements that are going on. One of the things that's on my mind with that is there's not really any complementary stuff that would reduce the incidence or the chance of those like non-contact type injuries. Is that right?
Yeah, and then so there's two sides of this. There's one is you're not preparing them to be athletic. Right. So, and you got to remember they're sitting and being on Zoom all day doing schoolwork and everything. That's on top of their entire, what I call the 23-hour factors. Their diet, their nutrition has completely gone by the wayside. They're up till 4 a.m. playing, Fortnite or whatever it is, and then they're sleeping till 1 p.m. So they're completely thrown off there. Their diets are not good, and so that's a really tough thing to manage. And then on top of that, they have no ability to express their athleticism. Yeah. And then the second piece of that is every coach is chomping at the bit, like trying to chew off the chain to when they can finally go. And when they do go, they're going to want to go with guns ablazing, and that is a huge, huge issue. So and as much as people like myself have been going on these types of things, talking about it night and day, there was a post from a coach that started going around that said, third day back and so proud of my guys. We just finished the Murph workout. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, that's a CrossFit workout, and it was done in honor of a Navy SEAL. And what it is a mile run followed by 100 pull-ups, followed by 200 push-ups, followed by 300 squats, followed by another mile run for time. Nothing on that list has anything to do with anything that happens on a football field. Yeah. Right. The only time you're ever running a mile is if the team bus breaks down a mile from the field and you're not going to make the game in time. Right. So that is just a recipe for soreness on a healthy kid that's been training since January. Now you're doing that to kids' third day in with this guise of mental toughness. It's just, it's heartbreaking to me. And I always say, and unfortunately what my business has become is legalized child abuse. Like if you came out of history class and you went home to mom and dad and said, my back is killing me, I can't even walk. Yeah. You'd have the teacher put up on charges. But if your strength coach does, it's good, he's tough, you got to, mental toughness. That's nonsense. That's never going to show up and translate to anything on a Friday night. Sure,
that's true. Coach, are you at all worried about Coach O'Flaherty's been doing a lot of fishing? Do you think that he's lost any of his explosiveness and athleticism during the quarantine, or do you think that he'll be okay?
No, I think he'll be just fine. As excited and nervous I was about getting on this podcast, being the level of celebrity that you get on here. I made sure I dressed up because I didn't realize Coach Flaherty was going to also dress up as well. So I know it's a very formal, like when Sinatra played the Copa, he didn't wear a T-shirt. So that's why I wanted to make sure I dressed up for the occasion.
That's right, Coach.
After all that nervousness, I get to watch this incredibly impressive young man you had on before me, and I can't top that. That's an impressive man. I'm sure it's not only when he steps inside those lines, but to have us represent us. I've had the good fortune of, as you said, doing workshops. I've gotten to work with our military service and got to work actually with the SEALs twice. Yeah. And they're just a different cut of human being.
Different animal, Coach. I agree with you on that. Coach, anything for Coach Tagati? I know if this was a comedy club, Coach, I'd be on my third set, just hogging
Yeah.
the mic, man. Anything for Coach Tagati?
Yeah, I got. He's a little fired up, so I'm going to try to keep him fired up with this two-part question here. All right. Obviously, we're all zooming. Everybody's doing workouts at home. First part is, what's your biggest pet peeve when you put on the camera and you see a kid working out? What's your biggest pet peeve when it comes to athletes training?
Is that the only? So I ask every client that's ever come through the door in the last 20 years, number one, why are you here? What's your goal? What are we looking to accomplish? Number two is, how do we know if we've gotten to that goal? And then say, when we take it to a workout, how do you know you've gotten a good workout? You know what my answer is? 99 times out of 100, I sweat a lot. I was really tired. It was hard to do. And I was really sore afterwards. And I say, oh, that's perfect, because here's what we're going to do. Is you're going to come to my house this weekend, and my wife is going to give you a list of stuff to do, and you're going to rake my leaves, you're going to mow my lawn, you're going to mulch, you're going to do it, and you'll get really sore and tired, and so that'll be an awesome workout. And they look at me like I'm crazy. Is that the goal of the workout is not to get sore and tired. Anybody could do that, right? You could go, and actually they'll pay you to do it. Like, go hop in the back of a pickup truck and do day labor. They'll pay you to sweat and get tired. So, and then also understanding the aspects of athleticism is that I always tell kids, you can't get tired and get explosive at the same time. It's just counterintuitive to how our human body works, right? So if you want to be really explosive, you shouldn't be getting tired in your workout. That doesn't mean you should never get tired, but understand that that's not how the body works.
Sure. Now, I know this one might get to you a little bit here. There's a lot of people that try to do what you do. And there's people at all different levels. But you see a lot of these buzzwords thrown around. What are some of these buzzwords that just, they're being, one, overused, but more importantly, misused? So what are some of those?
All right. So you want my bro science top three? All right. So here we go. We got muscle memory. Like, oh, you got to do it for muscle memory. All right. So, but nobody knows what that is, right? What we're really do is we're trying to create motor learning and how you acquire skill, whether that skill is how I'm going to acquire the skill to deadlift a bar, or I'm acquiring the skill to throw a football, right? And how you acquire that skill. Again, you don't do really good skill acquisition when you're tired. So the coach who says, run a lap and then come back because you weren't paying attention, you weren't acquiring the skill. So let's go make you really tired and unfocused, so you have less chance of acquiring that skill. All right. So the whole muscle memory thing of thinking that if I do something over and over again, that it's going to get me better at it. Well, first you have to have perfect practice. And when you really study motor learning, you have what's called deliberate practice, where you break things into chunks and say, okay, so if we look at, like Coach was talking about, and I would argue with Coach Johnson about the hitter's swing being the most, I would argue that a pitcher is more complex than a hitter. But if you look at a hitter's swing, you break down. When I coach a youth baseball team, I don't if I tell them 10,000 things to do in a swing, they're going to learn 0 of them. If I tell them one thing, this is what you do with your top hand. Get that down first, and here's a drill for that. And then here's what you're going to do with your bottom hand. And then this is what you're going to do with your hip. And we learn in what's called chunks. So the muscle memory thing is a big one. Number two is, I'm going to say, the fast twitch thing, right? And hey, we're working the fast twitch muscles. Okay, so nobody understands what that means. What that means is that basically your nervous system is what makes muscles go. Right? If you take your bicep out, lay it on a table, it's stupid. It'll just lay there. You could hook up a car battery to it. It'll contract. It goes on electrical impulses, whether it's conscious, like I'm going to throw you a ball, or it's reactive. You throw a ball at me and I put my hands up and react. And those are all based on certain patterns. And you can always tell someone who's never thrown a ball or caught a ball. And so when we acquire those patterns, it's best done initially during doing something which is called repeat practice. Okay, so where we're going through and you're just hammering the same thing over, and then your better skill acquisition once you've gotten your mechanics down is actually random practice. Whereas if you give some people a quiz and all you do is mix up the order of the questions and give them the same quiz over and over, they'll struggle. But because of that struggle, that's how we get better. But when we talk about fast twitch, there are certain muscles like our postural muscles, like the muscles of our upper back, which are important for support and so forth. Those are postural muscles. Those are meant to stay on for a long time. Whereas there's other muscles that are more meant to be explosive. And so how do you get those fast twitch muscles is through certain ways to bring that about in certain explosive drills. But most people make the excuse of, okay, I'm put down a speed ladder. And if I just do some choreographed drill with my head down through a speed ladder, I'm going to be fast twitch. Mm-hmm. And then the last one, I just actually wrote a blog post on this, on lactic acid. Lactic acid gets blamed for everything. You got to get the lactic acid out. First of all, humans don't produce lactic acid. You produce lactate. And the whole theory of lactic acid for fatigue was based on a study done about 100 years ago on frog legs. And unless you're training dissected amphibians, you're not dealing with lactic acid. So, and then the whole point of recovery, I have to flush out the lactic acid when I go for my mile run. You're not doing any of that. So those are probably the big three that will kind of get my spine tingling a little bit.
Well, two things. One, you learn a heck of a lot in just hearing you talk about those three things, and it's good to keep you fired up there. Last thing for me, Coach, we're obviously inching closer and closer to getting back on the field, and you gave the example of Coach putting their players through the Murph workout. A piece of advice: we're hitting the field. What should we be doing as coaches? Because again, everybody's going to say, let's gradually, get our kids back to where they were. But that's so broad, and I don't even know what that means. So can you shed some more light to that and give us some advice as we get back to the field, hopefully sooner than later?
Yeah, I think putting quality control measures in is a big thing to tell you when you're just getting tired versus getting better. So like, I'll give you an example. So I give a lot of the kids that I work with sprint workouts to work out on their own. And the way they do it is you have to cover a certain amount of ground or a certain amount of time. So let's say, as an example, I had some guys out today on a field, and you had 5 seconds to sprint as much as you can, all right? And so let's say they covered 40 yards for easy math. The next rep, after about 2 minutes rest, when they're fresh and ready to go, again, not tired, but they're fresh and ready to go, the next rep has to be within 5 to 10% of that last rep. That means, to do your math here, okay, SAT time, that means you're going to have to get at least under 44 to earn yourself another rep, right? At 10%. And I'll be a little bit more strict on the guys who've been training a while, and I'll cut it to 5%. So you have to get at least under 42 or you go home. And so if they hit it at 40, now there's a competitive aspect of it from a mental standpoint, but there's also that aspect that if they only cover 38 yards, now we know that they're out of gas and there's no point in doing more. All right. So having some of those quality controls in there is one. And then not trying to get it all back at once. Right, that you can, the idea of being a good minimalist is I can cover, if you want to cover 3 things, I got to find one drill that can get 3 things at once instead of doing 3 separate drills. Because really the volume is what's going to kill you, not so much anything. So I don't want you to go out and run slow. I just don't want you to run fast. And as soon as you stop going fast, cut it and then move to something else. And also being smart and do your most neurological challenging things up front, where you're going to do things where you really have to acquire skill and require brain power, whereas running sprints doesn't require as much. You could put that a little bit more towards the end.
Yeah, that's an interesting one in terms of coaches saying that efficiency that you're trying to kind of pack into the training. And I know, we've certainly tried to think outside the box just as coaches to say, hey, maybe, and we've even done this previously. I remember speaking at a clinic up Gillette Stadium up in Massachusetts back in February. We're talking about trying to maximize practice time and try to kill multiple birds with the same stone and do things like, hey, incorporate conditioning to a hurry up offense period, that sort of thing. Just being able. It sounds like yours is probably a more well engineered approach to the same thing, which is get efficiency from the time that you are spending. And now when you layer that with the top priority right now of avoiding injury as we go right back in it from nothing to full bore, I think is pretty important, is pretty significant for sure. Specifically when it comes to quarterbacks, what do you think about just that whole, and you've talked about issues around human movement and motor control and all that. What do you think are the one or two most important themes for quarterbacks when it comes to their movement? And obviously, you train all types of athletes across all types of sports, but you've spent a lot of time and you spent a lot of time with us, and we've looked at a lot of quarterback film, and you've done it independently as well. What do you think, like, thematically, if there's one or two things you could point out to quarterbacks to be really good at, just in terms of their movement? Forget about specific skill. What would they be?
This goes to any athlete, but especially a throwing athlete, is efficiency, is that there's not wasted movement and that they can learn what's called kinematic sequence. So here's another buzzword, functional. Like, what does that mean? It means that when there's a certain sequence when you do anything, whether it's throwing a ball, whether it's hitting a ball, whether it's swinging a tennis racket, and that it initiates at the hips, then it translates up into the torso, and then it translates to the shoulder, and then finally to the arm. If there's an inefficiency somewhere along that chain, what's going to happen is not only you're going to lose output, but you're going to put stress somewhere along that chain.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's reasons why you may not have that. It could be a mechanical reason. And this is why it's so great to work with a coach like yourself, is that I can sit there and watch a lesson and say, okay, well, I'm going to go, you're trying to get them to be able to get more hip and shoulder separation. And then and it's not sinking in. And I'm able to pull them aside and say, Coach, you could say it all day. They understand cognitively what you're trying to teach them, but they can't do it. Their body physically can't do it. They don't have the ability to rotate their trunk over their hips or their hips under their trunk. So they're just going to cheat and do it from something else. So I have to break out. Is it a movement issue? And then once I clear the movement issue, well, now it's your problem. Is it a skill issue? And then from there, then the third piece is it actually just, okay, they're fluid, they're beautiful, there's nothing behind it. They couldn't throw it over a puddle because there's just not enough horsepower. They need to get in the weight room. And that's one of the big challenges you have with your position, is that in working both baseball and football a lot, there's a lot of parallels between the pitchers and the QBs that nobody knows what to do with them, right? You either have them, squatting heavy with the linemen and killing them, or you say because they're specialized, they're stuck in a corner with a rubber band doing rotator cuff exercises because we're scared to get them too strong. And we don't really know how to train a quarterback. And so there's really, like, it's you have your lineman workouts, you have your workouts for your skill guys, and the quarterback's kind of on an island, just like so just like pitchers that so just you go over there and throw while we do defense, right, and get good at your lousy throw. Right, as opposed to being able to work on the attributes and figure out what is it this kid actually needs. And there's so many things that if I had that period where I could just have the quarterback to myself, that I can keep them busy, I would want more time with them, as opposed to keep yourself busy and just throw to one of the freshmen.
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly see that a lot, I'm sure, in a lot of programs. I would say probably on the order of about 20 to 25% of the guys that come to us for individual training at Complete QB probably report some sort of either chronic pain, or I guess something that would rise to the level of injury. At a minimum, discomfort. And there's probably another quarter that aren't reporting it because they don't want to seem like they're soft, or they don't want to get criticized, or in their own perception get set back in their pursuit of a starting job or whatever it might be. But we see a lot of guys with those type of kind of chronic things that are clear to us when we look at them. Like, well, it's certainly, as you mentioned, the kinematic chain. It's clear that this is happening because that is happening prior to it. What do you think are the one or two things that you see most often with quarterbacks that are avoidable type, even if they don't rise to the level of injuries, chronic pain and that sort of thing? What are the couple of the most common?
I'm going to go backwards. First is I think the key is to a great coach is having the rapport and the trust with your players, that they understand that they can come to you, and it's not being soft if you come to me and say something's not right here, because if you come to me early, it's a couple stretches and we're back, in a week or two, as opposed to you let it linger and now we're a month or two or worse because you didn't want to communicate. So building that line of communication. Now, in terms of injuries, obviously the elbow and shoulder are the big ones, but you also see low back. But the interesting thing is if you look at the chain of how the body works, it's called regional interdependence. And I'm trying to get up my SAT words here, but there's a way your body stacks in terms of mobility and stability. Like you talked about motor control, and we can talk about the difference between motor control and stability if we have time. But if you look at like the foot, generally we have very weak, floppy feet. If you ask any kid to balance with his sneaker off or his cleat off with it, they can't balance because their feet will automatically collapse. Then you look at the ankle. The ankle's usually really stiff. Then you look at knees. Obviously, they collapse a lot. That's why you have so many non-contact knee injuries. The hips will generally tend to be very stiff. Okay, the low back and lumbar area will tend to be very unstable. The T-spine and thorax will tend to be very stiff. So you see how they kind of layer on top of each other. So if we take this isolated approach of looking at parts and just say, oh, my hips are stiff, you can lay on a table, I'll stretch you, you'll feel like $1,000,000. I've seen people even called me a stretch doctor or flexibility genius from time to time. But
That's the one
you'll get up and you'll feel awesome. But by the time you get in your car, you'll probably be just as stiff as when you showed up, because you don't know what to do with that range. And there's a reason it may be stiff, because you're so unstable in your trunk that your hip flexors, your hamstrings, those sorts of things, your lats kick on to be stabilizers because your core isn't doing its job. And so now if you only address one, and sometimes your hips seem tight when it's really not tightness, and you stretch them and you may actually make them worse. So learning how that chain connects, and that if you don't rotate through your T-spine, that's why you're going to end up over-rotating through your lumbar spine. We see so many low back injuries with that. If you don't rotate through your hips, you're going to get a lot of lumbar spine. So you see so many low back with that. And then if you don't rotate through your T-spine, where am I going to get that load up from? That when I go to rotate, I'm going to have to overreach with my arm. And now same thing on my follow through. I can't rotate through the follow through my trunk. So I'm going to have to get it from somewhere, and I just overuse and abuse my arm.
For sure. I think that there's a really, it's really prevalent, and there's so many things along the way that can break down for sure. And I think one of the things that, they say knowledge is power, and I think that's especially true when it comes to this. But for some coaches and some of the things that I've seen, I guess even with some strength and conditioning guys, private quarterback coaches, sometimes I'll see advice that are given to athletes, and I wonder if it's based on any kind of science, or if it's based on any, real learned knowledge, or if it's just like, hey, it looks cool in a drill, it looks cool on Instagram. We got to make sure that we're giving them advice that fits with, it's like the doctor's oath, do no harm. You want to make sure these athletes are in good hands, and we're being safe through the range of movement that we're putting them through. I think is really important there. Coach O'Flaherty, anything else for Coach Degatti?
No, Coach, that's really good stuff. I'm glad this is recorded so I could go back and take some notes here. But as always, usually I don't get to see it until the Montville camp. So it was good catching up with you.
Well, and if there's one more thing I can add, that's like the least sexy Instagram thing. That's one of maybe the most important things that I institute with athletes that nobody really talks about. Is the habit you do the most throughout the day. Okay, and what that is that you can go, I always say you could go for weeks without food, days without water. You can only go a couple minutes without air. And so we breathe 15 to 16,000 times a day. And if you do that inefficiently, it's going to have an effect on a couple different things. And teaching, especially someone like a quarterback, how to do it, it's going to have effect, one, on their mental approach, right? That if you can if you learn how to deep breathe properly, you can actually lower your heart rate and blood pressure within 6 deep breaths. So you're thinking about your kid who's now fourth quarter, 2 minutes. How can I stay mentally focused? And I want to stay, there's two sides of our nervous system. There's your sympathetic fight or flight. That's stress. We don't want that. How do I keep them in that parasympathetic, cool kind of zone? Breathing is a huge thing. From a physiological aspect, we do a lot of work with breathing in our conditioning, teaching kids how to nasal breathe. Because if you think about stress breathing, it's through your mouth. Well, I always tell everybody, when you see the guy across from you breathing through his mouth, they're done. You're winning. Okay, so you want to learn how to nasal breathe, and from a physiological aspect, it's for better conditioning. And then actually from a structural standpoint, I have people who have shoulder issues because of their breathing. How much time do we have, Coach?
Go ahead, Coach. You got time.
So
Take a minute or two here to
here's
do
a quick little hands-on drill. I can do a hands-on drill on Zoom. All right, so if you take one hand and place it over the center of your chest where your sternum is, and put the other one over your belly button, okay? And you take a breath in. What you should feel is because we should be in a relaxed state. This isn't a very stressful situation here. You should feel most of that breath go down into your belly. If you think about like a stressful situation, like a bear just walked in the room, you're going to breathe up into your chest. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So now, if you do that because you're constantly in this state of stress, now, if you think about what that could be, it could be exam week. It could be all the sociological stuff that kids are dealing with right now. We had a long conversation with our teams last week, talking about how we took the week off just because of the mental stress and because of everything that's going on outside. And now you start to breathe up. Okay, so now if you take your fingertips and find your collarbones and kind of wrap your fingertips around your collarbones, and you'll feel those muscles there. So if you take that good breath down into your belly, which again, you want to breathe in through your nose, you probably don't feel much happening. Now, if you take another breath, a stress breath, up into your chest and into your mouth, you feel those muscles right there. Those are your scalenes. Those are accessory respiratory muscles. In times of stress, they pull up on your lungs. Now, if you do that 15,000 times a day, they're going to get jacked up. It's going to pull your head forward. Pulls your head forward. It changes the entire shoulder carriage and how it sits. And it's going to now react by how your head going forward. You're now getting into a lousier, rounded posture, which means you're not going to rotate well. You can't get into external rotation in your shoulder nearly as much. And so now people are going to say you have stiff shoulders or this or that, and they can stretch you till the cows come home, but you're going to go and breathe 15,000 times the wrong way, and that's where your shoulder problem could be coming from. So that's something that's not real Instagram sexy, but at that, it's about as fundamental as it gets. Teaching kids how to breathe and how to recover from a mental, physiological, and structural standpoint is incredibly powerful, especially for a throwing athlete.
For sure. Well, folks, if you are interested in that type of stuff, and you should be if you're an athlete or a coach of athletes, that's something that you should be interested in. If you find Eric Dagati, and it's at Eric Dagati, Dagati, as you can see on his label there, minus the apostrophe, Coach. We lose that on social media, right? So it's Eric Dagati, at Eric Dagati on both Twitter and Instagram. He's got a lot of stuff there, ericdagati.com. He routinely posts stuff that's just everything from stuff associated with the functional movement screen, to just good science when it comes to the way that the body moves. Get subscribed to Eric's stuff to really learn a whole lot, okay? Now, Coach, special treat for you. Now, you know that our guest earlier who preceded you was from the U.S. Naval Academy, and that's Maasai Maynor. So it brings us to complete QB trivia tonight. So, Coach, a lot of pressure here. You were not warned about this in pre-production meetings, so you'll have the opportunity to answer this question, and then we'll also give somebody, first person who answers, either DMs us, answers in the chat, or communicates directly with us will be the winner. But Coach Dagati, you've got the opportunity now and we got somebody in the chat. Coach Dagati's the man. Coach Dagati fans, they find you. No matter where they go. We could be on a ham radio in the middle of the desert somewhere, and they'd find you, Coach. You know that?
We travel well, yeah.
You really do, man. You're like Florida State for a bowl game, Coach. You really are. So now the trivia question tonight is Navy themed. We want to know who was the last player from the Naval Academy to win the Heisman Trophy, Coach. And your options are A, Maasai Maynor, who appeared on here earlier tonight. I'm going to give you a hint. I don't think it's A. B, Keenan Reynolds. C, Roger Staubach. Or D, Joe Bellino. So, Coach, we're going to give you an opportunity to reflect on it. You've got A, Maasai Maynor, B, Keenan Reynolds, C, Roger Staubach, and D, Joe Bellino. Coach Dagati, for a really, really nice piece of complete QB gear. Do you have the answer?
Okay, so I always, when I teach my workshops, I say that the word over 20 years, my three favorite words that I've acquired is I don't know. But if I'm going to take a wild guess without a lifeline, I'm going to go with C, even though I vehemently hate the Cowboys and anything related to them.
So Coach's answer was, the answer that Coach is going with is see Roger Staubach, and in fact, in 1963, Roger Staubach was the last Navy player at quarterback to win the Heisman Trophy. So, Coach Degatti, get ready, man. If you think this appearance is going to change your life, wait till you start rolling around town with some fresh Complete QB gear on. That's another life-changing experience just in and of itself. So, congratulations to you. We want to obviously thank you for being with us, Coach. Just the amount of knowledge I think that you bring to it. Coaching football is a thinking man's game. I really believe. Yes, part of it's instinctual. Yes, part of it's motivational, and those are big factors. But I think the guys who put in the time to think things out and have a reason for the stuff that they're teaching, they're like good classroom teachers. It's really, really crucial, and I think that's what you bring to the table. And obviously, the professionalism with which you deliver it is really appreciated. So we want to thank you for being with us, man. We look forward to coming back. I would like Coach O'Flaherty to get this guy back 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in to whatever preseason becomes, and just get his take. Give us the lay of the land on what's going on now that you're seeing different teams and consultation arrangements that you have with guys at all levels, what you're seeing the experiences after they're back at it. So we look forward to that, Coach, and want to really thank you once again for being with us, man. All right?
Thank you, guys. It's been awesome as always.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Guys, please make sure you follow us across all platforms at Complete QB on Facebook and Twitter, at Complete QB 2000 on Instagram, Complete QB videos at YouTube. So once again, folks, want to thank you. So look for updates on the next episode, guests, etc. For everybody here at Complete QB, good night, folks.